Back in the 70s, board games and improv theater had a baby, and it was called the role-playing game. These games allowed a generation of kids to live out their dreams of slaying dragons and saving kingdoms, all while sitting in their bedrooms and basements. Today, gaming has moved into the cultural mainstream, and role-playing games are back with a vengeance. Join us now as 5 of these former kids come out of the basement and onto the internet to experience adventure, mystery, and obscure pop culture references. It's time for Roll for Combat!
Hey everyone, welcome to a special episode of Roll for Combat. I'm your GM and host Stephen Glicker, and this week I'm sitting down and interviewing the 2 owners of Iron GM Games, Rone Barton and Lou Agresta. The reason I'm having them on the show is that next week they launch the Grimmerspace Kickstarter. Grimmerspace has been, well, all over the place if you're on Facebook or Twitter or pretty much anything on the internet and subscribe to anything Starfinder related. You've probably been seeing a lot of mentions of this. A few reasons. 1, well, it sounds really cool. And 2, Sean Astin is involved with this. You've probably heard of him. He's in something called like Lord of the Rings, and he was this other thing called Stranger Things. He's been in the Big Bang Theory. He's kind of a big deal. And he is one of the creative directors and helped come up with this world. What makes Grimmerspace so cool is that it is science fiction horror, and they go all the way. I really do like Starfinder quite a bit, but as many people have said, Starfinder has sort of fallen into the Guardians of the Galaxy genre, which is fun, but every so often you like to mix it up, and one of my favorite genres is sci-fi horror. So when I talked to these guys about this almost 2 years ago, I was on board. I wanted to get involved with this. It sounded awesome. Plus, I knew these guys were going to be making a huge amount of content. They were going to have something like 14 adventures, 14 unique locations, all with different attributes and overviews, and some of them are going to be like gothic horror to comedy horror to body horror. There's all these different horror types, and they hit the gamut. And my favorite part is that Richard Pett, who has written some of the most horrific normal adventures, like his regular adventures are pretty horrific, and I'm thinking, wow, if this guy gets to write something in the realm of sci-fi horror, it's going to be something special. And sure enough, it is. And in fact, it's a free adventure, Abattoir 8. And I'm going to be running it at PaizoCon next week, as well as the guys from Iron GM. They're going to be running it all weekend at PaizoCon. You can also just download it right now for free if you want to get an idea of what Grimmerspace is about. I think it's a really good adventure. Even some of the graphics and the images in that adventure will give you an idea of what to expect, and it is pretty gruesome. There's one image in there especially that is nasty. I love it. So I got to sit down with these 2 guys. We talk all about Grimmerspace. We talk about their history in the industry. And then we just talk about horror in general, like what they like, what I like, what inspires us. And then, of course, we talk about Sean Astin's involvement with Iron GM Games and Grimmerspace. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview. Everyone, this is Steve, and I got a special treat. I have the creators of Iron GM Games with me. I have Rone Barton and Lou Agresta, who are coming out with a very, yeah, that's right. I said it that way. Coming out with a very, very cool gaming system for Starfinder. In a couple of weeks, they're going to have a big old Kickstarter I've been talking about on the podcast like a ton, called Grimmerspace. And this thing has got a lot going for it. But before we get into Grimmerspace, let's say hi to Rone and Lou. Hello, guys.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having us on.
Hello. Glad to be here.
And who is who, so people can identify the voices?
I am Rone.
And I am Lou.
There we go. So now people know who to bet their anger at.
That would be Lou.
That would be Lou. So before we get into it, you guys have been around a long time, and I know you from doing the Iron GM Challenge at Gen Con and other places. This, though, is a little different, but let's get into just a little bit of your background and some of the cool things you guys have been doing over the years.
All right. Well, me first, I guess. Sorry, Lou, you snooze, you lose. I've been an RPG game designer and editor and podcaster for a good long while, and I won a couple of Ennies, Best Podcast, Gold, Best Electronic Book, and I've worked for TSR, and I've written for Goodman Games, and I've written for Gunmetal Games, and 01 Games, and Terrasol Games, and just a bunch of games, and I'm boring myself. Lou, take over.
I will take over. Same thing. Good Lord, we've been doing this. I've been doing this since I say about 2004. Rone and I met with a writing guild called the Were Cabbages, and we went on to get tutored by some big names in gaming. We were lucky enough to learn from them, and like he said, we went on to win a bunch of Ennies. I'm probably best known for work that I've done with Rone for 01 Games and Paizo and resurrecting
and the guy who saved Razor Coast.
Resurrecting a project called Razor Coast, nominated for 5 Ennies, won a silver for Best Adventure. But I edited and developed that one, other writers on it. And we went on to do so many projects together. And then we made Iron GM, which is an event that's been around the country. It's been in other countries, and it brings together the best improvisational game masters, throws 3 secret story elements at them, demands they invent a game in an hour, and then the players judge whether they sucked rocks or blew socks off. And the best GMs win tens of thousands of dollars of prizes. We've had people had to get additional plane seats to bring their prizes home from Gen Con. And then we formed Iron GM Games off of that to become publishers and bring our worlds to life, and to take some of the improvisational genius we saw at work and put it into adventures.
I think your bio there outdid mine, so I'd just like to say that I also invented dragons.
Yes, real dragons. You invented real dragons.
You're welcome.
So with that and that amazing background, and I didn't know you worked. I actually also wrote for Goodman Games. I helped run the DCC adventures way back when, if you remember those.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, back in 2007, 2008, the Were Cabbage Writing Group on our private forums, we used to do these exercises like 100 mysterious events that would happen down by the dock, 10 interesting taverns, and we just create these little articles. And I said, why don't we put these all in a book? And Steve Greer, great game designer, went to Joseph Goodman, and we wrote GM Gems. And it was actually like the 75th top-selling RPG product that year. I got to be an editor and help manage the project, and certainly contributed a ton of writing to it, and as did Lou. And then we had a sequel for Goodman called PC Pearls.
Yeah, and we came up with a character called Bedlam Havoc, which we gave to personality who wanders all through that book with the protocols, all the things adventurers should do to stay alive, and they were hilarious. And Clinton Boomer did a lot of the humor in that as well. And I got to voice that character a lot. That was a lot of fun.
Cool. So the main reason we're here is something called Grimmerspace. Which I've been hearing about for a long, long time. I spoke to Lou about this a while ago, but it's finally coming to life. I even see a web page. I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook. There's even an adventure out, and it looks like this thing is going to actually happen, and we're going to have a big old Kickstarter and lots of videos coming out. So tell me a little bit. And oh wait, there's someone, me. That's right, me, who's going to be running some Grimmerspace at Paizo Saturday from, I believe it's 1 to 5, that specific time. And that's actually going to be broadcast on the Paizo Twitch stream as well.
That's right.
We're going to even have like a little studio audience. And me and Param from No Direction are going to actually, Param's going to produce it, and I'm going to actually run the game. So between the two of us, we're going to figure this thing out.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. But with all that, tell me all about Grimmerspace, because there's so much to go about it. And I'll say my favorite genre of science fiction is horror science fiction. And one of the main reasons I even play Starfinder is because I like science fiction. But then when I saw you had horror science fiction, like hardcore horror science fiction in the guise of like Aliens and like Event Horizon, all the real nasty horror sci-fi, and then you're developing an entire system, an entire world of this. So I probably talked too long. You guys tell me all about it.
I think you did a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our work here is done. We can go home.
Shortest interview ever. Okay. No, tell me. Well, I mean, I've only seen a little bit because I saw and tested Abattoir 8.
For sure.
But I don't know about all the other stuff. But there's so much to talk about. Let's first talk about, just give me the background of what Grimmerspace even is.
Sure. Hit him with the overview. So here's the overview. Grimmerspace is a corner of the galaxy, science-only horror corner of the galaxy, no magic, and it's invaded by magic for the very first time, and it pits a science-only horror galaxy against a science fantasy galaxy, which is the default world of Starfinder, and the two clash. And so magic plays a horror role because to the Grimmers of Grimmerspace, for the first time, magic is a horrifying and terrifying thing. It's something you've never seen before. And we pit these two worlds against each other. And so that's the core nugget at the essence of Grimmerspace, that the magic world and the science-only horror world are clashing. They're coming together. The horror in Grimmerspace, though, is broad. We plan to cover 15 different types. Rone can talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, and we have 15 different types of horror. You can have gothic horror just because it's in space. You can still have gothic horror. You can have crime horror. You can have war horror, like what you'd see in Overlord, and surreal horror that's more high concept. And of course, as with our giveaway adventure that you can get for free, Abattoir 8, that's splatter/survival horror. So any way you want to approach horror in our setting, you can. If you have a particular sort of horror that you prefer, there's actually different polities or star kingdoms, a way to think about it. We have 5 different polities, and this is where your character likely hails from. And each polity sort of engenders a certain selection of horror genres. Like, say, a place called the Eminent Spectrality. Well, that's where you go for gothic horror and bioengineering at its ugliest end, sort of, Reanimator style. And if you like things that can happen among crowds, outbreaks, things that could go terribly wrong, no place better than the mega arcologies of the Attian Combine, where 1 billion people will live in a single building that's so tall it rises into space, on a planet that has 8 of those, and they all compete with one another. So whatever kind of horror you like, you can find it, and you can find it especially in one of those places your character might hail from.
One thing I wanted to talk about is that Grimmerspace is both a setting as well as adventures, as well as monsters. Like, Grimmerspace is something that you can run as is, and there's pre-made adventures, or you can even just add little side adventures or little elements into your home campaign if you want these type of horror elements. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's completely correct. The core book that we're kickstarting is half setting and half adventures, and every setting location in the setting part of the book has an adventure, a matching adventure in the same book, and those adventures will be anywhere from 1 session long to 2-3 at the max. And you can play that completely in Grimmerspace. It's plug and play for you to take a location with an adventure that goes with it and pull it out, plug it, and play it right into your own home campaign, or to play it in the overall milieu, which connects the default Starfinder setting to the world of Grimmerspace and the overarching conflict of science versus magic. So you've got these 3 different ways to play with the core book in your hands.
And I'm looking at the different types of horror. Tell me about the comedy horror. I want to know more. I get body, I get gothic, I get splatter, but what's
Sure.
comedy horror?
Well, comedy horror, if you see Dead Alive or Shaun of the Dead, there's plenty of places where it's like it may satirize horror a bit, but it actually has genuine scares. I think comedy horror is something we're probably going to save for special moments. There'll certainly be places for it, but when it's comedy horror, there's always an element of human failure and the absurd. And quite often there's a satirizing of the horror genre, although done effective enough that you, as I said, can actually be genuinely scared. But when we approach comedy, we'll definitely finesse it and make sure that it's not satire. Yeah, so with comedy horror, you quite often it'll be a satire of horror, but still an effective satire of horror. We're not going to go in a satirical direction when we do that. Our approach to comedy horror, when we approach it, will be to highlight absurdity and futility, and you'll have your, I guess you'll have your Coen brothers in space sort of thing with lots of blood, probably.
So who is involved with this? Because you have both some pretty popular / famous authors as well as some guy named Sean Astin. Tell me more about Sean's involvement.
Oh, that guy. Yeah. Well, Sean is a friend of Rone's and mine from that we got to know from working on another RPG related project that we're still working on. It's still live and strong. And in the course of working on that, we came to be working on Grimmerspace, and we thought that he was very much a perfect fit. And so at that juncture, we called him up and said, "Hey, Sean, we're about to launch Grimmerspace, and we'd really love you to be creatively involved. What do you think?" And we were a little leery, or I was a little leery of asking too much of him. And his response was, don't try to sell me on this. You guys, your stories are worthy. What you're doing is worthy. Story is worthy. I'm in. And so he's jumped in with both feet to help us out with this, and already given us a lot of creative input that's changed the course of the setting.
What was his involvement exactly? I mean, I know he's doing some videos, but does he actually play Starfinder, or is he just help with the overall setting and the videos?
He's a creative developer. He does not play Starfinder yet, but he is a creative developer. It's fair to say that Rone and I have introduced him to gaming, and we intend to get him. It's our intention to get him to play Starfinder with us. Hopefully, we'll be making that happen. But as a creative developer, he reviews the material and he gives his input on what will make it cinematic, what will make it effective, what will make it stronger. And that's been really invaluable. And we expect it to continue to be.
And what are the videos he created? Because I saw a couple of them and they are both, I mean, it's nice to have a professional actor make videos for you in your, and that's kind of, he's comedy horror, actually. There's comedy horror because the stuff he's been doing is kind of funny and sort of a little bit satirical as well.
The thing is, what you haven't seen is you've only seen maybe one video where it looks like we're going to be killed. There's a bunch of videos where it doesn't look like we're going to be killed. We're totally going to get killed.
Yeah, you were asking about comedy horror, man. There you go.
Yeah, so it's immersed. It's immersive. Like basically, he plays in some of our promotional fun skits, he plays an anchorman named Vic-26, and we're the hapless reporters in the field, and it never goes well for us. So in some cases, shockingly so. It gets kind of progressively more disastrous the more you see us. And so, but we do it immersive as if it's actually happening in Grimmerspace. It's a Grimmerspace news report. That's why I said it's really happening.
With those reports, are those tied into the adventures, the little video vignettes?
No, you've seen one that is tied into the Abattoir 8 adventure, and on our Facebook page and some of our social media, we put it out there. So what we've created are around a series of these news reports that will be released during the Kickstarter, where, as Rone said, Sean plays Vic-26, the news reporter reporting on events in Grimmerspace. They're comedy horror skits where Rone and I are news reporters embedded in the setting. Things don't go well for us. We think they're pretty funny. Sean was in the studio for hours and we were recording them with him. And then they speak to parts of the setting. we took the one that also happened to overlap with Abattoir 8 and pull it out and release it early, both as a preview of what's coming for people to enjoy during the Kickstarter, videos of Sean Astin acting a role within Grimmerspace, and also because it connects to the free giveaway adventure. So people can see it's actually number 5 out of order of these on our social media, but there's a number more of them that will be released during the Kickstarter for people to see.
So here's the thing, though. The reason why we did those videos to release during the Kickstarter is because video 1 introduces you into the new big baddies in the setting and their shock troops. And then factions are covered, mysterious places on the outer edge. So different parts of our setting, different aspects of our core book, and then the bestiary, each of those gets its own video. So there'll be a series of videos, and each one will highlight and lead the discussion into the fact that, hey, they're strange creatures. So that would be the bestiary one, or factions. There's a point where Lou and I are kidnapped by space pirates called the Shung Corsarium. And that's a whole video too. And in that one, I actually got stabbed. So when you see me get stabbed by a space pirate, that really happened on set. I was stabbed with a large Chinese weapon across my throat. Fun story there.
By a real space pirate?
Well, no, that part's not real.
By my girlfriend.
Yes, a real space pirate.
There you go. So what about some of the authors? Because obviously you have the free adventure out now, Abattoir 8, and that's written by Richard Pett, who is synonymous with insane adventures. But then you got a couple of other people like Adam Daigle and Jason Bullman and Owen Stevens. How did they contribute? Are they writing adventures? Are they writing content? I presume they're writing everything, obviously, because you need authors. So
sure. Well, it runs the spectrum, and some of this is yet to be determined because we're going to let them pick and choose what they most wish to do. But the answer to your question in short is yes. Some of them are creating monsters. Some of them are creating adventures. Some of them are writing setting material. We've got Greg Vaughn, Shanna Germain, Jason Bullman, Wolfgang Bauer, Eric Mona's writing our forward.
Ben McFarland, James Sutter.
Yeah, Shanna Germain, Owen Stevens, Jason Bullman, Wolfgang Bauer, Greg Vaughn, Eric Mona's writing our forward. And like I said, a lot of them are going to pick and choose what they want to do, but monsters, adventures, setting material, people are involved up to their hips, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a collaboration. We went out to get the best of the best so that we could have everyone to contribute. And the truth is that many of these people are our friends, and we've looked for ways to collaborate with them and to be creative with them for a long time. And it's really exciting that when we finally get to do something that's coming from the heart and from a place this is ours, we get to do this, all our friends are saying yes, and we want to do it with you. And that feels great.
That's true. You've been saying to me since like 2010 that you and Greg were going to write part of an AP together, or you were going to write this together, and you guys just never got your shot to collaborate, right?
Yeah, that's true. We were going to write an AP, and then they were like, "No, we're tired of this kind of, like no more pirates." And then we were going to work on another AP, and I simply couldn't do it because of personal reasons in my life, and so I didn't get the shot at the AP has its timetable, so I couldn't get on board that particular time. And then Greg moved on to some other thing. Yeah, it's just like life didn't cooperate. So to be able to finally get to work together is really exciting.
So wait, you said no more pirates, but aren't there space pirates? And didn't they stab Rone? What's going on?
Oh, hey, we don't have a problem with pirates. It's whoever Lou and Greg were going to write for that had an issue with no more pirates. I guess that was Paizo?
Correct. And rightfully, understandably so. This is post Skull and Shackles.
So actually, let's talk about the Kickstarter. So when does the Kickstarter start? It starts right around PaizoCon.
May 22nd.
May 22nd. That's the official date.
Correct.
What can you tell me about it? I know very little about the Kickstarter, so pretend I know nothing.
It is a Wednesday is named after Woden or Odin, and it's the middle of the week. Oh, you mean? Oh, I'm sorry, Lou. This is your expertise. You talk about the Kickstarter. I thought he wanted to know about Wednesday.
Okay. So we have a lot of really amazing things, I think, going on with the Kickstarter. The first is, of course, the books themselves. You have your core setting book and adventures book. And like I said, every element, half setting, half adventures, fully funded. This will be a 256-page book with full color, hardback. Fully funded, we're looking at a 96-page or thereabouts bestiary, and we're looking at player's guide, chock full of all the player material. We're looking at two 48-page adventures, one by Richard Pett, the Abattoir 8 that is being given away for free, will then be married to a part 2 that's equally long. And while Abattoir 8 stands on its own as a complete adventure, when it gets its part 2, they'll go together and become Casket of the Cull, which is an even more involved, complex adventure. And then Greg Vaughn will write an adventure set in another polity of Grimmerspace, another central star kingdom or nation that players come from. So you'll get a total of 5 books. Is that right? Did I count right? Can I count past my fingers? All right. Thank you. That's good to know. And so that's the core of the offering there in terms of the books. On top of that, Gaming Paper is contributing access to their roles in Black Hex for Starship Combat, their singles, and their erasable tiles. We have poster maps of both the Galaxy of Grimmerspace, which has some unique features, and of the Starship that you can win in Casket of the Cull as a playable battle mat. The navigational poster for the Galaxy is pretty interesting and unique, because here's something you need that is important to think of that hit us when we first started thinking about this. Grimmerspace as a science-only corner of the galaxy with no magic can't have the drift drive initially, because the drift drive for getting around Starfinder is magic-based. So they got to have something else. And that something else has to be a little different, and it's going to be affected by things like fuel, air, and food. And yet we don't want to have some big bookkeeping problem. So we had to solve that. And so we have a star map where you can take a ruler or a piece of string, connect it from one destination to another destination, take that and put it to the key right to the side and measure out, oh, that's how much air I need, how much fuel, and how much food, really simply, and calculate everything you need to get from one point of Grimmerspace to another. So we have that. Another thing that we have that we've arranged for is the ability to deliver the beginner's box or the Starfinder core rulebook as part of a backer level. And that is pretty unique. So people who want to try Starfinder for the first time or introduce it to people who feel the beginner box is a good place to start, or who are Starfinder curious, are going to have backer pledges where that's appropriate. That's not an endorsement by Paizo of either Grimmerspace or our Kickstarter, but it is something we're arranging as a one-stop shopping courtesy for our backers. Some other things we're going to have a mini, and that mini will be of the settings contagonist or stormtrooper minions of the bad guys, a creature called the Hodrak, a species called the Hodrak. We've gone out of our way to pre-design them, pre-pour them, pre-buy them. So there's a limited number. When they're gone, because we're not tying the success of the Kickstarter to anything to do with miniatures. We've pre-bought them. If the Kickstarter fails, Rone and I own a lot of minis.
Whole bunch of minis.
But we wanted to make sure they were there for people who wanted them. And they're amazing. And Effin' Cool Minis is making them. And they're metal. And I've got an old school feeling for metal. I know that's not everyone's favorite, but some people just absolutely love them. And you're going to love these because they're off the hook. Let's see. gosh, I could go on and on. There's just a smorgasbord of incredible options to add to this Kickstarter.
So what about the different adventures? Because I've talked to you about that you have not only the larger adventures, but you have cool short adventures, mini adventures, and these doorway encounters so that you could easily incorporate these into your campaigns.
Well, I think the best way to understand that is maybe to understand a little bit more about the setting, because each aspect of the setting gets its own adventure. Maybe Rone, do you want to give them an overview of the crux, the edge, the gyre, and how it lays out?
The cosmology of the Gliding Room Galaxy, which is shortened to G-Rim, that's where we get Grim, and the people who are natives of the G-Rim Galaxy are the Grimmers. There's five star polities, and those are near the center of the galaxy, which is called the crux. And each of these polities carves up their territory. And any adventure that takes place to give you a feel for a polity, how many words is that, Lou? Are we going up to 7,500 for those, or 5,000? How many words for a polity?
It's about 7,500 plus or minus.
Okay, so 7,500, because that's a major location. So we don't just want you to read I mean, we have some player options, and we have character classes you can do, and factions you can join, and all of that. But then there's backstory about the polity. Well, along with the backstory of the polity is actually an adventure in the polity itself. So you can learn it sort of Berlitz style, like learning a language. You just immerse into an adventure, and so you see by living in the world itself. Those adventures need to be about 7,500 words. How long? How many sessions is that?
Yeah, I mean, word count may vary. That really depends. It's more like it'll play out in 2 to 3 sessions. It shouldn't be more than 3 sessions. Some will be 2, some will be 3.
But then you get to other places. As you move outward from the crux, you move towards the edge, and this is where colonies give way to unexplored planets and distant colonies and distant resource gathering for these major polities. And when we find we have a bunch of adventures planned for those areas too. And how many words are those, Lou? Are those like 2,500?
No, it's more like 1 to 2 sessions. So and as you get out to the edge, that's also where things get weirder and stranger and darker and less controlled, right? That's it's less civilized, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's these places that we're just giving you a quick step in and experience it. The doorway adventure, the portal type adventures, you're just basically getting a taste. It's more of a single encounter to give some of the flavor of Grimmerspace. And so you have the crux at the center of the G-Rim Galaxy, and then you've got the edge, and that's the outer edge. This looks like it used to be a double bar spiral galaxy, but at either end, the spirals are pulled down for some massive gravitational force. So from a distance, the entire galaxy looks like a tornado. It looks tornadic. It's a vortex. And those arms that spin downward and entwine underneath the G-Rim Galaxy, that's called the gyre. And that is where things exist that are beyond understanding. And you don't go into the gyre, but sometimes things do come out of the gyre, and they're absolutely terrible.
Right, and things get chased out of the gyre too.
Yeah, bad things chased by worse things.
And one of those things being the entire race of the Hodrak that we were just discussing, that we've made a mini for. And they get chased and right into the arms of the setting's big bads, the Sunder Mages.
And those are the ones who, not even on purpose, wound up coming to this galaxy, opening up a huge tear in space-time called the Seethe that can be seen from a great distance as it millions of miles across and glows with a white and purple light. And out of that tear comes this enormous ship and these nigh immortal wizards who, by the time they reach the G-Rim, they've been traveling for thousands of years, and they've fused with an abomination that was trapped aboard their ship, and their own magic items, and they're like epic level mages. So they are unto gods, and they have come here for conquest. And where that's certainly scary, and the Grimmers have reason to be afraid. The Grimmers have been beating back horrors from the depths for a very long time, and this is just a new enemy, and it's going to be bullets versus fireballs. You take your pick.
That's right. And it's that rip in space-time through which magic is leaking. Whatever is chasing the Hodrak and other things out of the dryer, nobody knows, but the Hodrak get driven in the arms of the Sunder Mages, and for various reasons, the two team up. And now we have our overarching conflict and our overarching theme, under which 15 different kinds of horror, many different themes, many different kinds of conflict will be explored.
And each of our worlds in the polity, it should be said, like the Adian Combine, I explained that there's mega arcologies there, and there's 8 of them on this planet Adian Prime. You could have your entire adventure, first level through 20th level, be in a single mega arcology and still not see but a sliver of what could happen there. You could stay in any particular polity and have a full, absolutely full adventure experience, like the lifetime of your character, or you can travel between all of them. But if you do want to stay put, we've got character classes that work well if you travel to places beyond, and yet the home planet, and yet there's also character classes that fit really nicely if you choose to stay put. You want to talk about the character classes a little, Lou?
Yeah, sure. I want to make sure that we answered your question. We went into that cosmology to say that, if you're having your adventures in one of the crux polities that are the defining root civilizations of Grimmerspace, from which players will tend to come if they've decided that their characters are coming from Grimmerspace originally, then you're going to have in the core setting book, it'll tend to be the 2 and 3 plus session adventures. If you're playing an adventure that comes from one of the edge locations, like Rone mentioned and alluded to, this is probably one of the 1 to 2 session adventures. And scattered through that, like he indicated, there are the doorway encounters, and these are encounters that will kick you off, that you can use to launch your own particular flavor of adventure for the rest of that evening. Also from each of these, like Rone is saying, you have, they give rise to their own character classes, they give rise to their own organizations, they give rise to their own themes, they lend themselves to their own kind of horror. So for example, the eminent spectrality, which lends itself to gothic horror, also is the home of 5 houses obsessed with avoiding death and superstitious about their planet of origin. Because it's built on the bones of a lost civilization, they believe they must feed with a blood ritual intermittently, or they will be haunted by the elder builders whose homeworld solitaire they inhabit. And because they pursue life extension technology, they are the most advanced in medical and biotech. And that gives rise to a character class, the Recombinator, which is something like a mechanic instead of having a drone that you build and advance with levels,
or an exoskeleton, an external drone or an exoskeleton, rather than have it be mechanical. It's actually a vat-grown creature, a unique vat-grown creature that you've created, that either wraps around you like a second skin or operates separately.
Correct.
With some intelligence.
So how many extra classes are there besides this very cool sounding one, or other new classes that you're introducing?
So each of the polities wound up giving rise to a new class or archetype or player option of one sort or another. We actually started with the mission of keeping player options to a minimum, for the reason that there were so many new player options in the Paizo core material that people needed places to play much more than they needed new player options from third parties. But we found it inevitable that new player options arose organically, naturally, and unavoidably from the material. So every core polity gave rise to at least something.
So let me actually ask you about the setting. Main question is why? Why do space horror? There's so many other different types of settings, but you guys decided to do a space horror Starfinder setting.
Rone is sick. That's why.
No, well, besides that, I mean, for someone like me, I love it, but it's not something you see very often. It's just you see a lot of high fantasy, and you see, especially with Starfinder, because it's more in the Guardians of the Galaxy style. It's kind of goofy or fun things that have been a lot of stuff that's been released for Starfinder is very similar to the current Starfinder feel, and it's just different options. But this is going in a very different direction. This is taking the Starfinder rules, but really perverting them, especially if you look at the Richard Pett adventure. It just goes in a very, very different direction.
Well, I think you said it there. Hey, it's you don't see a lot of that. Well, that's one of the reasons to do it. And I really like science fiction horror myself. I like science fiction in general. I like horror, and I like science fiction horror. And I take my horror pretty seriously. I'm usually a bit unimpressed with horror. It quite often gets phoned in, and what's successful is very formulaic. But just like with words, it amazes me how words can be beautiful or how they can be terrible. Horror is one of those things that when it's done right, it can put you in a place that you're not used to being. The same way that something that makes you exult can just lift your spirits. Horror can do it can accomplish some really amazing things, so long as it's not tired and hackneyed, so long as it stays bold, so long as it remembers what it takes to scare people, or at least give it a good attempt. So we take our horror pretty seriously, and there's a lot of debate about, is this scary enough? It's like I say, it's like a boxer's uppercut. It doesn't knock you out because it hits you so hard. It comes in at an angle that you're not ready for, and it shakes the brain. And horror is like that. When you see that thing you weren't expecting to see. And that's important. Being original and creating original horror is very important. So we're not just skinning like famous movies that we've seen. Not that you're not inspired by things you've seen before. We're really making an earnest attempt to bring people new types of scares. Very committed to original storytelling, and the horror is a place where that's a challenge. And so if you get it right, you've really done something. Science fiction horror is so good when it's good, and when it's so bad, it's just so bad.
It's just painful. To me, all of fantasy and science fiction serves a function that dream often serves, which is it enables us to look at things from an angle that are too hard to face dead on. But you get to do something in science fiction and horror that you don't do in fantasy. In horror, the cloak of dream is thinner. You get to look at things a little more head on, and they're a little more horrifying, hence the name. And in science fiction, you're asking a very specific question. What does it mean to be human? And you're ready to brace the answer that maybe that's not so pretty. And facing that truth and being willing to face the answer a little more dead on, that maybe that's not so nice, can serve as a very useful spur to art and creativity, and perhaps get some useful answers. Or maybe that's too aggressive. At least it can ask some useful questions.
So what are some of your favorite horror, Rone? If you treat your horror seriously, give us some recommendations, things that inspired you for this.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm a cinephile and a reader. I'm not a reader like Lou's a reader, but what Lou is to reading, I am to film. So
it can be film. Trust me, it can be anything.
Yeah, no. But it's kind of like this. I've written essays to guide our writers along, where I base all kinds of points based on all kinds of movies. So it's almost it's like somebody saying, "What's your favorite food?" I don't have favorites of anything, but what has inspired me, a good smattering of I mean, I've definitely seen well over 10,000 films, and although there's been some schlock horror in there, there's been some really, really fine storytelling. A good portion of that is probably horror. So it's probably just like, why don't we just start a spin-off podcast called, Rone and Steve and Lou Talk Horror? Because I couldn't come down on one thing. If you name any science fiction horror film, I can probably expound on it ad nauseum and put everyone to sleep, because I've got a lot of opinions about everything. But I don't know if there's any single things that I can point to. I'm inspired by science fiction horror, and I'm inspired by all sorts of stories going all the way back. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give a pithy answer there.
What about Lou? He's got to have something.
In horror and science fiction, in books, what would you like?
Horror science fiction.
Well, very recently, I saw a horror movie that impressed me, which was A Dark Song. And that is a slow-moving European horror film about a woman trying to reconnect with her lost child and seeking esoteric ways to do so. I found that one, that was kind of a cosmic, supernatural, religious, almost horror. That was pretty impressive. A horror piece. I've read more science fiction than I have read horror. Horror I've mostly seen in film. Another recent horror film that had a moment that really worked for me was Overlord, which was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was very gratuitous and splashy and exciting in a lot of different ways. But it had this one really intimate, fantastic moment where...
In the attic,
exactly. Where they're... I don't want to spoil it. Spoilers.
No,
spoilers alert.
You're going to
Spoiler
spoil
alert.
it. You're going to spoil it. And speaking of which, you mentioned Dark Song. There's another film very much like that out of India. Speaking of foreign films about talking to the dead, called The Other Side of the Door, which was also pretty fantastic and very much like A Dark Song, but definitely in a different storytelling style.
So spoiler alert on Overlord. Close your ears if you don't want to be spoiled. You have been alerted. Have you seen it yourself, Stephen?
No, but that's okay. I'll see it eventually.
Okay, so
I'm waiting.
Well, why don't you just talk about, Lou? Without spoiling the film, why don't you just talk about what you learned, like what was effective? Yes.
Yeah. Here's what I learned there. There's an event that happens, and there were many places they could have chosen to place this event, and instead, what they chose to do was place it in a very closed, intimate space where people had just enough room to move around, but not enough room to be out of reach, and no ability to actually leave the room without putting themselves in even greater danger. And the helplessness, the many layers of helplessness, and the fact that it was all happening in an intimate personal space range made everything so inescapably in your underpants. It was just so crawl up your spine, like someone had dropped a cockroach down your shirt. It was just a perfect choice to really get you with the moment viscerally, and it stuck to me.
And that's the thing. It's not just, do you have a monster? Do you, I'm a scary monster. It's where you pull it off. I've seen a ton of vampire films, but Russell Simmons did a black and white vampire film back in the 90s called The Addiction, and Lily Taylor starred in it. It was really interesting, a little esoteric. It was sort of it was almost like a junkie writer detailing their descent into heroin addiction, only she was talking about becoming a vampire. And we saw what happened in Blade at the start, or Blade 2, was that the one where there's a party and it something pops off at a party and people start dying in the party. But The Addiction had a moment where there was just like an apartment party, and half the people in the apartment are vampires. You just don't really get that until they turn around and they just start slaughtering people. But because it was shot on a sort of verite style and you were listening in on real conversations, it was shocking to see their gear shift into something like that. So even in Abattoir 8, a scene that we added to the start to let you know that you're not in Kansas anymore, is that when you first are ferried to the space station and you see that there's a huge space station surrounded by smaller ships and they're all derelict, they're dark, the lights are off for the most part, and there's bodies floating in space, and you see an airlock door open, and out steps a naked man who smiles at you and waves and steps out and cartwheels slowly to his death in space. And what's so upsetting about that is that he was smiling and that he was naked. He was at his most vulnerable, and space is the ultimate weapon, and he had no armor against this weapon. Steps out with a smile. Why is he smiling? What could possibly be happening here? And Lou, how did that go over with the playtesters?
Invariably, the playtest response to that was some version of a jaw drop or a irretrievable shudder. There was one playtest group where I was watching it over the vidcam, and I saw one person at the table reach their hand out like they were trying to grab and stop someone from doing something. And of course, half the time afterwards, everyone was like, no, yeah, whatever. Which is also funny to see.
It's a small moment. It's not a violent thing. It's not a too terrible thing, but it shakes the brain a bit. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I'm old school. I actually like a lot of Stephen King just because he does a lot of stuff like that where he will take very ordinary circumstances and just add one odd or strange element to it to make it disturbing. I've actually taken a couple courses on Stephen King books and just the way he writes. And I'm also a child of the 80s. So that was, very big in the 80s. Everything was Stephen King. But
so you've read Dance Macabre?
Actually, I have not read Dance Macabre.
Book on writing horror, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know his books on writing are actually his best. His books on writing and actually the books on Little League. His Little League books are incredible, the short stories. But yeah, he's actually, famous for doing that, is that he'll take very normal circumstances and just warp them. And that's like the secret to a lot of his success. But I will give you a short story. Let's see if any of you have read this one. The most horrific thing I've ever read is by Piers Anthony, of all people, called On the Uses of Torture. Have any of you read that?
I have a ton of Piers Anthony books, but I don't know if I've ever read a Piers
Say it
Anthony.
again. You cut out for a second.
It's Piers Anthony. It's from his anthology, which is a bunch of short stories, and it's called On the Uses of Torture. You could actually look it up on Amazon, and it has a lot of people saying,
"Nope, I will."
Do people say don't read this? There's a lot of articles about like this is horrific, and it's one of those few things that I read that sort of changed me. When I read it, I was like, yikes, this is
so we're gonna blame Piers Anthony for this.
Yeah, pretty much. I know, of all people, Piers Anthony, the master of Xanth and Split Infinity and the Bio of the Space Tyrant. Actually, Bio of the Space Tyrant is pretty horrific too.
Yeah, I do have the anthology, so I'm gonna have to go read it. But yeah, I do have the anthology book, so now I have to go read it. So if I don't come back, know that you're responsible for sending me into the mouth of madness.
I'll be curious to see what you think of it. I mean, I read it when I was like in high school. I actually went back to reread it recently, and it stands up. It's horror. It's horrible. It's horrible. I mean, yeah, it's one of those books that you read and you stories that you read and you wonder what was the guy thinking who wrote this. It's disturbing, not in the way that, oh, this is scary. It's disturbing in the way of like, wow, who is sick enough to actually write a story like this?
Yeah, I have thoughts like that I've put down over the decades. I've written down scenes that are so beyond what you see in horror that they're either brilliant or they're the worst thing that's ever happened in a Word file. And I don't write those up because I don't think there's a home for them, but I certainly like to see how far the mind will stretch, both towards beautiful and terrible things. And I have a great respect for anybody who can go where nobody's gone before, and can prove it. So I have to go read the story now and see how disturbed Piers Anthony actually is.
He's pretty disturbed. It's pretty disturbed. It's. I'm looking at it right now. It's got it's one of those that gets strange reviews. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I'll be honest. I like a lot of Stephen King short stories, as opposed to his longer works. He does some pretty horrific things. A lot of his short stories. I don't know why Stephen King short stories seem to have a little bit more power than his longer books.
Yeah, I've enjoyed them too, definitely. And I remember when Clive Barker came along, and I was a teenager, and I picked up his first books, his collections, and Stephen King endorsed him pretty heavily when he first came out. And I remember those strange tales where he mixed beautiful things with terrible things, the way Clive Barker likes to do, and put the bouquet of roses right next to the guts, that sort of thing.
We'll wrap this up shortly, but tell me a little bit about Abattoir 8, because for those of you who want to know more about Grimmerspace and what it's all about, you can download this free adventure by Richard Pett. It has enough for you to go from level 1 to 3, and I played some of it. And the other nice thing about this adventure is that it has lots of different types of adventure themes. It has a lot of different tropes in it, so it's not just one type of adventure. It's not just like all body horror or all like psycho killer chasing you. It's got a little bit of everything. It sort of mixes it up, which also is good. That's another secret of good horror, is like actually one of my favorite people of horror, believe it or not, is, this is going to sound strange, it's not even horror, but the Frighteners. The
Frighteners is great. That's one of those few films. It's one of those few films where I could watch J. Lee Ermey turn his arms into machine guns and try to defend everybody. That film has a kind of rewatchability that I don't even understand. I can't usually watch a film over and over again, but The Frighteners was fantastic. And
it's fantastic. And I watched that in the theater, and I remember I'm like, oh, it's a comedy. Oh, it's a drama. Oh, it's a horror film? Like, it goes all over the place, and it succeeds in amazing ways. But your game is the Abattoir 8's kind of like that, because it's kind of a little bit of everything, and because of that, it's really disturbing.
Well, that's a good cut. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually thanking Richard, not you guys, but yes, I'm kidding.
No, that's okay. We thank him every day.
But anyhow, tell us a little bit about the free download that they can get.
Sure. Well, they can get it at DriveThruRPG. They can also, if they prefer, download it on the Open Gaming Store. Just look up Abattoir 8, and there's also a free map pack that goes with it, where we've already extracted the maps and the art and stuff for easy use for your convenience. Not VTT ready yet. That'll come with the Kickstarter. But at least we did some of the work there for you. The adventure itself is on a space station, an agricultural station orbiting the planet Conviction that has gone mysteriously dark. And the adventurers are tasked with finding out why, because the flow of food to the colonies is not resumed. There's going to be rioting. There's going to be starvation. There's going to be a lot of problems. And if they rely on the powers that be and the Attian Combine, one of our 5 polities, or more precisely, the outsourced company Hunger Incorporated, tasked with managing these agricultural stations, well, it's going to be an awful long time before anything gets fixed. So off they go to fix the problem, find out what went wrong, what could possibly go wrong, because it's only a floating abattoir in space where they slaughter Thunk, the everyone's favorite food ungulate. Nothing could go wrong, right, Ron?
That's correct, sir.
That's a joke my brother and I always have, because we also love going on scary rides, like the old classic dark rides. And that's the old, everything's fine, nothing could possibly go wrong. And then like every Jurassic Park ride, every Universal Studios ride, it's always something goes horribly wrong. And so before we go on a ride, my brother and I was looking at each other and we say, and nothing could possibly go wrong.
Right, exactly. And so I don't want to give anything away, but they players arrive. There's a number of reasons and ways they could arrive. We injected our one little bit of comedy horror in the entire adventure right in the hooks for people to choose from. We've included pre-gens, including level 2 pre-gens for players that, so you don't have to pause if you just want to, give it a go, not inserting into your home campaign. And you have to navigate this station and this floating abattoir and agricultural hub to get to control and figure out what went wrong and try to get it back on track. And it turns into you must escape. This particular adventure is splatter horror, survival horror. Those are its primary genres. Yeah. Of definitely. Of our 15, there are other subgenres in there. You'll see on the back of this adventure, and this will be on all of our adventures, we list our 15 kinds of horror, and then we light up the ones that are primarily what you'll find in this adventure. Doesn't mean
that way you know what you're getting.
Right, exactly. Doesn't mean the other kinds aren't in there. It just means primarily that's what happens to be in this one. And for the next adventure, it'll be something totally different, primarily cosmic and psychological with a little bit of splatter, but we didn't bother lighting that up because it wasn't important enough. And
like the next half of the adventure is cosmic and body. I would say definitely cosmic horror and body horror heavily.
Right, exactly.
I was going to say is that one thing I like about the adventure is the artwork, because, it's sometimes hard to, as good of a GM as some people might be, to constantly keep that level of horror up. But some of the artwork in this is really, really, I can't give anything away because it's all spoilers, but there is some really nasty stuff. All I know is there's one or two in here that I'm definitely going to get to be able to show during the Paizo adventure. And I can't wait to show some of the horrific artwork that you guys have created for this adventure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we take a lot of pride in it. We've worked with some, I had the honor of being the art director for this and reaching out to artists around the world who caught our eye and helped create a standard for Grimmerspace. And they were just fantastic. And I went to I went to some artists who didn't actually have horror in their portfolio. Not a lick of it. And so some of that stuff you might be going where you're like, that's a deeply disturbing painting. That guy only does children's books. And you're like, well, why did you approach this person? I just saw something that I knew would translate, and I dared knock on their door and say, hey, and you always feel a little guilty. Like, would you mind painting something absolutely terrible? And they're like, sure, because it gives them a chance to stretch. So I think we've probably made a couple of people's ArtStation portfolios take a sudden turn to the left.
Right. Or stretch, or so much like, will I? Because nobody has ever asked me to do that since I did that popular children's book, and it's what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They like the chance to just work in horror because they never do. And so we've really just gotten the best out of people, and I'll send along the art order and maybe a sketch I did of what it's supposed to look like, and it'll come back, and I'll send it to Lou immediately, and I'll go, what do you think? And you're like, yeah, that's really scary. It's really disturbing. It really sets a mood. So the art's been fantastic, and we don't want to get too art drunk with this Kickstarter, but we also sort of do, because the art is just so amazing. Pulls you right in and tells such a story. You could probably just look at our books if you didn't want to read them and still get something out of it.
I would definitely say our material is 13 plus, and we've been careful to maintain our Paizo compatibility, our Starfinder compatibility, but we've also walked right up to the line a couple of times. We did have 2 different standards reviews in order to make sure we didn't cross that line. But yes, including the artwork, we did walk up to it once or twice and say, oh, look, the line.
We'll wrap this up So the Kickstarter is in less than a month, where you'll be able to find out more about Grimmerspace, see all the cool videos with Sean Astin. You'll be able to see you guys get killed by a real space pirate. I'm looking forward to that. And then when do you expect this to come out, or is that all dependent on how the Kickstarter goes along?
It is dependent on how the Kickstarter comes along. Fully funded, it will enable Rone and I to focus on it pretty much full time. That should allow us to deliver within, I want to say 4 to 6 months, everything.
Oh, really? 4 to 6 months? Great. I was thinking like a year. So,
well, I'm gonna say 6 months, but
okay. How about 6 months to a year? How about that?
Let's call it 6 months to a year.
Go.
Let me not get too aggressive.
Go.
Let me overpromise and hopefully underdeliver.
Yes. Well, that's fine. People expect the Kickstarters. They rarely will go right up to time. But as long as you give them lots of updates, and you guys already have the free adventure, is worth it alone. I mean, that alone is a quality. That alone shows the level of quality.
There's a proof of our standard, our quality. You can see our layout. You can see how we put our stories together. The storytelling quality, the art quality, the layout, and I think you get a pretty good idea of what we're going to be bringing you.
Cool. And you guys are going to be at PaizoCon?
Oh, yeah. We're going to be at PaizoCon running Abattoir 8 ourselves for those who dare. 3 to 4 times a day, every day of the con. There'll be your live play broadcast of it, your actual play broadcast of it. And then after the banquet,
Paizo banquet.
After the Paizo banquet, we're gonna host a Grimmerspace launch party, which will be either celebrating the amazing Kickstarter. No, I'm just gonna say it. We will be celebrating the amazing Kickstarter and our gratitude for all the wonderful support we've received, because space is vast and what we have planned to explore is vast. And this Kickstarter is just the beginning, because it's going to launch our company, IronGN Games, which is going to allow us to explore everything that the Grimmerspace world has to offer, and hopefully be delivering material to fans for years to come. Can't do it without everyone here. Can't do it without this first step. And so we're going to be celebrating that in an after-hours party Saturday night after the launch party. There will be free drinks for some people. There will be custom drinks that are direct out of Grimmerspace. There will be me dancing. Nobody wants to see that. What else will there be? Door prizes. Wonderful.
I don't
stuff.
know. Once you said you dancing, my brain just shut down.
Well, that is the horror right there.
Right. That's 16. That's 16 types of horror.
There you go. Well, I'll be at that party. That sounds like fun. If I'm invited, that is.
Of course you're invited.
I don't know. You never know with these things.
Run our live play. Now go home.
Well, you never know. You never know. I got things to do. I got people to see, things to do. I'm busy at PaizoCon.
Param will be there.
Param? Oh, be at the party? Well, in that case, I definitely will not. I definitely will go. I meant, yes, of course. All right, cool. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. I do like what has been shown so far. This is what I'm planning on doing for the live play. I'm going to go all out, and I'm going to try to kill these guys as much as possible. But when I kill them, I'm just going to let them restart and come right back alive, and that'll do a little counter to see how many times I can actually kill them during the adventure. Because otherwise, it's not fun if they just die and then it's over, and then we'll have like 2 hours of air to fill. So I'll just let them come back, and then I'll just give them like a little sticker or something on their badge, like a little like black ribbon to show every time they die. So I'm still figuring it out, but it's gonna be fun.
Then I will say cryptically, 2 saws. That's all I'm saying. 2 saws.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. And you guys can go to Grimmerspace.com, obviously, to find out about this. And you guys have been posting a ton on Facebook, so people can follow you on Facebook. and Twitter and all the social media outlets, of course. And you guys have been very, very busy.
Sure, there's Iron GM Games at Facebook, there's Grimmerspace on Twitter, and there's a Grimmerspace Facebook group as well.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Get some sleep, Rone. You sound tired.
I am tired. I'm going to go right to bed. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Steve. It was great talking to you and getting a chance to talk about our fantastic dream here. And I really hope we can make it happen.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it. I am going to go do like another hour or two worth of Kickstarter work and then pass out.
Hey, everyone. Steve here. So there we go. Interview is over. Thanks once again to the guys from Iron GM Games for joining me. We will all be at PaizoCon next week. And if you want to actually see Grimmerspace in action, you can tune into Twitch. Go to the Paizo channel on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and I will be running a game of Grimmerspace. We have 4 volunteers, have very cool characters, a mixture of some of the pre-gens as well as their own custom-made characters. And I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be killing them left and right. They're just going to die. In fact, I even had specially made ribbons to put on their badges, so every single time they die, they get another ribbon. I'm going to hopefully have the ribbons going all the way down to their waist. I just want it to look like a necktie of death. By the way, how I'm going to handle that is every time they die, I'll have them come back and a little more messed up each time. That way we can continue on the adventure, because otherwise it'll be a real short episode. You know, it might only be an hour long after I kill them all off. Hopefully it will go the full 4 hours and I can kill them at least a good dozen times. We'll see, but do check that out. May 25th, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Just go to Twitch, just go to Paizo, and you'll see us playing. And of course, don't forget, look for the Kickstarter. That's actually starting up next Wednesday. May 22nd is when it goes live. You guys can check it out. It's got a who's who of industry legends contributing to this thing. It looks fantastic. The graphics alone are awesome. And quite frankly, you just don't see this type of content in the world of RPGs. Usually things go a little safer, or if you even do, it's usually like one small supplement or one mini adventure. Here you get a massive amount of content that can hold you over for years. I'm really looking forward to it. Anyhow, with that, I will talk and see you guys next week. See ya.